Good morning, everyone. My name is Zeno Lancaster. I'm the owner of Lancaster Law Firm here headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina, with offices in Hendersonville and Canton, North Carolina. I'm here to talk today about things that can help you guys with your closings, as usual. Today, we're going to be talking about seller sides, listing agents. We get a lot of emails from people that'll say something like, "Hey Zeno, I finally have a buyer, so we're going to work with you." And it always confuses me because I'm like, well, you finally have a buyer because that's your first client, or you finally have a buyer because you do mostly listings? And what I've found is I have realtors out there that apparently, especially if they're mostly listings, they seem to think they have to use the buyer's attorney. Certainly, and I want to talk about that. When can you use the buyer's attorney for your seller side documents? Why might you want to do that? Why might you not want to do that? And just make sure everyone knows their choices when they're getting all of that set up. And because again, it's been coming up lately. Oh yeah, we haven't seen you in a while, but it's because I've had all sellers. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. So in North Carolina, the closing attorney, the one handling the title search, the escrow agent holding all the money, and doing the buyer side closing, they represent the buyers. Even if they've been hired to also do seller documents, they represent the buyers. If there's a dispute, they would have to tell the sellers, hey, you need to go get your own attorney, a separate attorney. We just were hired to do seller documents. And in North Carolina, the state bar has said that's not a conflict of interest by itself. In other words, buyer attorney, since it's so transactional, since the parties have already agreed to terms and they've negotiated through their realtors typically and they're under contract, that while closing attorney, you represent the buyer, we'll let you draft the seller documents. In other words, we'll let you draft the deed, the lien affidavit, the 1099, the typical documents that are required for a closing. And as long as that's all that's done, there's no conflict there. And they allow them to do that. It keeps things smooth most often, and all of that. Having said that, if there is a dispute and the sellers come to that closing attorney and say, hey, we think the buyer's in breach, what should we do? That closing attorney should not advise them. They should tell them, hey, on this kind of thing, you're going to need to go seek separate counsel. I represent the buyers in this dispute now. Now, those are rare, and that's why you see closing offices all the time represent both sides, or represent the buyer and take on the seller documents. Let me get my words right. Some attorneys' offices won't do it. Some attorneys' offices only want one side or the other. They just don't want to mess with it, with those potentialities. In my experience, they're very rare where you have a dispute where I've had to tell a seller to go get their own counsel probably 2 or 3 times in about 10 years. So it is very rare. I've done it. And I explain why, and most of the time the sellers actually all of those times the sellers have understood, and I've recommended certain attorneys to help them with that. The truth is, a lot of these disputes in real estate work themselves out, and so typically that may not even be necessary. I may give them that advice, and instead of doing that, they just work it out with the buyers with their realtors and whatnot, and we end up closing. Without seeking advice of other counsel, but that's their choice. They certainly were given that recommendation at that point. So having said all of that, if you're a listing agent out there and you want to use the attorney you want to use, you shouldn't feel obligated to send your sellers and their seller document preparation to another attorney. You can, if that attorney is great, send it to them. I'm sure it'll go smoothly and all that under those same sort of principles I talked about. So in other words, if you're using us for a closing, we would love to help you listing agents with your seller documents. I think you would find a good experience with us and all that. However, if you have an attorney you love and you don't want to send your sellers to us and we're handling the buyer side, that's okay. You can send them to your preferred attorney. They can draft those seller documents and advise your sellers on that transaction for you. The same, the reverse is true. If listing agents out there, if the buyers are using a particular attorney, there's no reason you have to use that attorney for your seller side. You can say, Zeno, we'd love for you to draft seller documents. No problem. Now I know a lot of agents out there know this because we get lots of seller side only referrals. But again, I'm just seeing, I don't know what's going on out there. I'm seeing a lot of agents tell me, hey Zeno, can you represent this client? Finally got a client that's on the buyer side, and I've had sellers lately, which doesn't, then why wouldn't you send them over to us if you're wanting to work with us? And then we've had other agents that have just said, I'm only listing, so I don't know if, I really love to work with you, but I'm only listings, I'm only seller side. None of that makes any difference. You can always choose your attorney to work with. So work with who you love, whether you're on buyer side or seller side. They certainly appreciate the business. They deserve it because they've worked hard for you. And it's going to make your life a lot smoother, which is most important, right? We talk about everything being in-house and under one house and it being smoother. As long as your attorney is great, it's going to be smooth regardless. I mean, the seller documents have to be delivered to the closing attorney. That's the only big hurdle that you might avoid by using the same office to do both. And it's a pretty small hurdle. I mean, if you're using actual offices, heck, they're almost all on 1 or 2 blocks here, as you guys know. But we also FedEx documents all the time. We courier documents. We always make sure they're on time. So that's not really a hurdle that you should be too worried about as far as making things go smoother and all that. Certainly, I would love to hear in the comments on your experiences with using separate attorneys versus both. Are there things I'm not thinking of? Would you rather have separate attorneys? Would you rather have both? And all of that. Is there anything out there that's indicating that you should do one or the other that I'm not aware of? Let's see. Chris McCoy says, good topic. As mostly a buyer's agent, clients ask me if they should get their own attorney. Because of a closing that went south last year at the last second, I've been recommending hiring a separate attorney just in case, in the slim chance there's an issue. That's fine. I would push that as long as you make sure that separate attorney is good, right? You don't want to just do it based on a principle. You want to make sure that you're referring them to a good separate attorney. Otherwise, I would say refer to the same one. Again, these issues usually iron themselves out when they do come up, and it's rare that they do. So I do think you're rarely going to see that, but it is true. And I do know that some folks keep them separate. I know some law offices that keep them separate for that reason. They just don't want to mess with it if it comes up. In my experience, it's just so rare and it's rare. When it does, it irons itself out. And when it doesn't, it's pretty easy to hand them off to another attorney. So that's what I tell people. But I do get that. And closings going south at the last second are awful, as we know. People showing up at the closing table telling me sellers haven't moved out, or there's a hole in the kitchen floor that something was sitting on before that they found during the walkthrough, or the buyer's loan isn't ready, or their money's not ready. They didn't sell their stock in time. Whose fault is that? All kinds of stuff come up last minute. I will say most of that stuff irons itself out though. Once you say we're not closing till that hole's fixed, it pretty much happens pretty quickly. Whether they, when I send them to another attorney, that's what the attorney's going to tell them. So a lot of times they read between the lines there. But anyway, cool. Well, guys, that's going to be a quick one today. Please, again, comment or put any questions or thoughts down there. Invite anyone you want that you think would benefit from the group to this group. Please follow us on Instagram. I'm at flying _casual, and at Lancaster Law Firm. Please add us on Facebook, Lancaster Law Firm, and myself, Zeno Lancaster. Guys, we've had a bigger team than we've ever had. We've got 4 attorneys total. We're going to have two including myself in the Asheville headquarters. We have one, British is out there headquartering the Hendersonville office. We'll have Jonathan Fernandez headquartering the Canton office. we're opening that Canton office, guys. I'm waiting on a new door, and and signs, and everything's taking longer right now, as you guys know. But we are ready to go, and hoping to get some closings in there in July or August. So excited about that. We've got a huge team of paralegals and abstractors, guys. The best team in the business, of which I'm aware. If you know anybody wanting to join a great team, please send them our way. Have them email me at zeno@lancasterlawfirm.com. We're trying to continue building our awesome team, guys. I'm nothing without my awesome team. So please check us out. We'd love to work with any of you that we haven't worked with yet. Please try us out. Let me know if you have questions on that as well. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your week.